We start off in a time when we were in having a lot of hard times. And it happened that one nation would be fighting with the next nation, would be fighting back. Maybe Gayongguelno would come into Onondawaga territory, hunting or something, and maybe something happened and somebody got killed. Then they'd fight back and get even. And then next thing you know, all of this is going back and forth. And the people were really struggling at that time. Well, it was a pretty desperate time amongst the people. And as I said, there was a lot of hardship and a lot of bloodshed and a lot of war. And all of the nations were poor because they had to keep worrying all the time about war. And they're always involved in it. And it happened that up here on the other side of Lake Ontario, in a place called the Bay of Quinties, up in this area, there was born a man that we refer to as the Peacemaker. And I'm going to symbolize him. I'm going to draw him and use this symbol. And they say that he was a very special man, and he grew up and lived amongst the Huron people there. And that this peacemaker was sent to the people with his instructions. So he was sent to bring peace amongst the people. And in his story, the story of the peacemaker himself, he had a hard time amongst his own people, amongst the Huron people. And he had this message of peace. And with this great message of peace, his message was that we needed to stop having war. And we needed to stop the bloodshed and fighting one another. And his message, as I said, was sent from the Creator. And he was sent to remind us how we should live. And in the story of how these nations came together, this peacemaker had a hard time convincing his own people to listen to his message. And he had this message of peace. And his message was of peace, power, and righteousness. And that we could be better and could do better for ourselves by being kind to one another. And his own people were also convinced that war was the way. And he decided, when he became a young man, that he would leave. And he left, the peacemaker left his territory amongst the Huron nation. And that when he left, he told his mom And he told his grandma that he was going to be leaving them. And he had to spread this message of peace. This message of peace, power, and righteousness. And that their people were not ready to hear it. So he decided to go to other places and go to other territories and tell his story and tell his message. So what he did was he built a canoe, and he found in the hillside, in the cliffside, a type of stone, white stone, and he carved a canoe out of stone. And his mother and his grandmother worried about him. But when it was his time to leave, he dragged that white stone canoe to the water's edge, pushed it out in the water, and like a miracle, it floated. And he left the Bay of Quintes and the Huron people. And when he left there, he paddled across a part of Lake Ontario, and he landed in the territory of the Gagnon people. Now, these territories were kind of, the lines might have kind of went like this a little bit, you know, for where their territories were. And they might have been moved over a little bit. This is just a sketch to give us an idea. But what happened is he ended up going first to the territory of the Gagnon people. And I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to use the back of it for a minute. And you know, a long time ago, you couldn't just go to somebody's village and go walking in, especially during these times of war. And what he did was, so what the Peacemaker did was, he went to the outside of their village in that Gagnon territory, and he did what was the custom at that time. And if you'd like to, you can sketch along with me while I do this. But they said that what you would have to do long ago is you would build a fire when you came to somebody's village, and maybe out in the woods somewhere, you start a fire, a small fire, like a campfire. And for your own safety and for the safety of the people, this was the custom of that time, was they start that fire out there. And of course, with any fire, what it's going to do is it's going to make smoke. So the smoke from his little campfire went up, and the people were always on alert all the time, because like I said, it was hard times. People are always at war. People always had to be on their guard. And the story says that once his smoke went up into the air, that the people saw it. And it's funny. There's some things that may seem like a stereotype about natives, and they say that we send smoke signals, and we did. It's true. And that was kind of a smoke signal that he sent up, because when he sent that smoke up, people in the village could see it. And what they did was they would send a runner out to see who's there. And it was funny because near his fire, the Peacemaker himself was sitting there. And while he was sitting there, he was kind of doing something that might have been a little bit different. And the leaders of that village would send a runner out. And they send their runner out to see who it is. And they have their runners check out to see what the one sending up the smoke, what they want. And what are their intentions? And are they peaceful, or do they want trouble? So anyways, it happened that the Peacemaker, when they saw him, he was a normal guy, and he happened to have and was looking at this thing that he had set up where he was. And it wasn't in the fire, but he was kind of sitting near his fire. But they said that he had and was sitting there looking at this thing that was like almost like a cooking spit. And it wasn't over the fire, it was off to the side like this, but that this cooking spit was sticks, made of sticks. And that where these things were set up, he happened to have on it these strings that had beads on them. These strings of wooden beads. And these wooden beads were kind of like symbols. These wooden beads reminded him of his message of peace. And when somebody showed up to investigate who he was and what they wanted, what he wanted, rather. He took down a small string of these beads and he handed it to them. And the runners from that village came and they asked the Peacemaker, "What do you want? Why are you here?" And focusing kind of on those beads, he took them down, took a string of them off of the rack there, and he gave it to them, gave it to the runner, and he said, "Tell your chiefs, tell your people to rejoice, because the message of peace, power, and righteousness has come to the people, has come to your people. And so you should be happy and celebrate." So the Peacemaker gave that string of beads to those runners, and he told them to take it back now and tell your people this. And it happened that they were kind of surprised by it, because people didn't talk like that in those days. Everybody was very warlike still. And as he was serious about this, they said, "Okay." And they took that string of beads. They say they were made of elder twigs, hollowed out and put on strings. And they say that he sent his word. He says, "These represent my words, so take it." And they did. So they took that to their leaders. And the leaders asked them, "Who's that? Who's out there?" And they said, "It's this Huron guy who said to celebrate because the message of peace, power, and righteousness has come to the people. And he gave us this string of beads." And the chiefs, the leaders of the Ganyagiano people, thought that it was very strange. And they thought, "Wow, what is this guy about?" And they told their runners, "Go get him." So those runners from the Ganyagiano village went back out there. And they got the Peacemaker, and we refer to him as the Peacemaker, and they brought him back. And they brought him to their village. And once he was there, they asked him about his message.